All right, good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining us for this month's or this morning's Beef Brunch Educational Series webinar. My name is Jason Holmes, and I'll be hosting for you today. We've also got Dr. Ashley Edwards. She was on the road today, so she's working off of a hotspot, but we do have Dr. Edwards with us this morning as well. Our speaker today is Bradley Pousson. If you're not familiar with who Brad is, he's an area extension agent doing livestock work in Southwest Louisiana. Housed out of the Cameron Parish office. Today, he will be going over ways producers can prepare for and begin recovering after natural disasters. I'd like to cover a few housekeeping notes before we get started. We will be muting your microphones, and we ask that you please keep them muted throughout the webinar. If you are joining us online via the Teams app or link, please enter your questions into the Q&A box at any time during the presentation. If you are calling in, you may text your questions to me, again, Jason Holmes, at 318-243-4931. Again, if you are calling in, and you can text me questions throughout the webinar, and that number is 318-243-4931. In the interest of time, we will wait to answer any questions until the end of the presentation. With that, Brad, we thank you for taking the time to be with us this morning and put this talk together. You should be able to unmute your mic and begin whenever you are ready.
Thank you all this morning for having me. This is kind of one of those presentations, everybody's got their own topic that they feel very close to. And within the past several years, we've had some kind of disaster or some kind of event in our area, whether it's Southwest Louisiana, Southeast last year. So this is something I think a lot of producers need to hear and kind of prepare for, or at least have some kind of plan in the back of their mind for when something does come awry, that we can better facilitate and mitigate what happens afterwards. So the main two I want to talk about, I'm trying to advance the slide here. I don't know. There, okay. The two main ones we're going to talk about, because the ones we really deal with, and I will talk about a little bit about the drought afterwards, drought conditions afterwards. But the two main ones we got to look at it first, being in South Louisiana, we deal a lot with hurricanes. Whether every year when hurricane season hits, this is something we think about. It's always in the back of our mind, whether it's just because we had one previous year or still some PTSD from the ones that happened years ago. And then we got to think about what happens in the winter. In 2021, we dealt with something that we really haven't dealt with in a long time. It was a winter storm. But we got to think about, though, what actually classifies as a winter storm. I mean, it can be cold. You can have 30-degree weather for a week or so at a time. But what classifies that as a storm? So, and we got to think about the past storms also. What was significant about each one? What was a hurricane? How much water? Was there a huge storm surge? The amount of rain that came with those storms. Maybe going on the winter aspect, how long did it stay cold? How long was that ice there present to where cattle were suffering and couldn't really warm back up? And what were some things that we did that we could have done, or other mitigation points that we should have done? So going to hurricanes, I mean, we try to see where the standard was. And in 2005, we had Katrina that hit southeast Louisiana into Mississippi. And we also had Hurricane Rita on Southwest Louisiana side. In 2008, brought us Hurricane Ike. Wind damage really wasn't there because it hit more towards that Galveston area, but that storm surge was very prevalent in our area, pushing salt water into pastures and also some farmland, crop ground. So in 2017, Harvey hit in Houston, but it made that easterly jaw once it made landfall into our area, and it dumped that heavy amounts of rain, flooding pastures. And we had to eventually evacuate some cattle out of lower lying areas. In 2020, of course, we had the big one, Hurricane Laura, and then Delta afterwards. Two totally different storms from a damage aspect. Delta did bring a lot of, did have some wind, but the amount of rain that was there with Delta was not there for Laura. And Laura, you had more of the wind damage, more structural damage. In 2021, we had Ida on the east end of the state, which is very similar to Laura, except that you feel like you had a combination of that Laura and Delta. You had the water and the wind. And then, of course, our recent freezes. You know, what's the last freeze we had? I mean, I tried thinking back this morning, just when our last big freeze we had. It's been quite a few years. I remember the snow. First time I ever remember snow was in 2017 when we had a little snow event here, and it really wasn't that much of an event or a storm per se. Again, Rita has set the standard. Now we have a new standard. We have Laura and we have Ida to compare ourselves to. What exactly happened between those storms, and what was the differences and the damage? You know, after Katrina and Rita, we built a little bit better. Okay, so we thought, all right, it should stand. Our structure should stand to a Rita size storm. Well, it went up a couple of sizes, so to speak. But and after visiting with Jason after the storm, he's in North Louisiana, and it was up there towards Farmerville at a Category 1. So, and he said he'd never seen that happen before. So that was something very different about that storm, where you saw damage all the way up to North Louisiana. When you get a lot of damage, you got to think of, okay, what actually did get damaged? Well, there's a lot of pine trees in the area. There's a lot of tall trees, which when they do fall over and break, they're going to land on the fence. So that is something a lot of producers are going up towards that way never really dealt with in the past, even with whenever Rita had hit. So when you're dealing with hurricanes, it's mainly, or any kind of disaster, you need to look at 3 parts. We're going to evacuate. Where are we going to go? Where are we going to bring our cattle? Then there's going to be a during portion where you're going to have to sit down and wait. You have to wait for this thing to get over with and figure out what's the game plan for afterwards. And of course, the aftermath, we got to evaluate, and then you got to execute a plan. Whether it's, am I going to sell? Which after some of these storms, a lot of producers do sell out really quickly. And then also evaluation, you know, do I have enough resources available to me to go back and fix a fence? Just for instance, and if there's anybody from Southeast on, they can they'll chime in at the end, but we had total destruction of fences below the intercoastal after Laura. All right. It takes a lot of money to go back and put those fences that were there back up to be able to bring those cattle back. So is this feasible for me? Which that goes back to the evaluation. Is this going to be feasible for me to be able to do this? Which a lot of producers, they've done this more than once already. So this is a time where like they just want to sell out and be done. Hate to see that, but again, it's nature of the beast sometimes. All right, evacuation. You can't book a hotel room for your cows. Insurance will not pay for them. Trust me, I know people that have tried. But always have a safe place for them. And when you think of a safe place, if you do have high ground is very important when dealing with any kind of water event, whether it's a hurricane or flood, or if you just got a spot for them to go be able to get out the water. The problem with having them in a safe place, if you're going to try to leave them and move them, you got to worry about debris. Debris will cause more damage. And then whether it's found sore issues, cattle stepping on nails, any kind of debris that's in those pastures, cattle will get to it. You know, those of y'all that have cattle for a very long time know that if it's there, it's bound to happen. So try to call your friends in this situation. I mean, we're all in this together. We're all part of an industry, a very prevalent industry that we're very passionate about. And just like you're evacuating, plan for an extended stay for those cattle. If you're moving them to higher ground, be ready to supplement. Grass is going to go very quickly. So make sure you have a means of supplementing those cattle, whether it's hay, feed, water is extremely important. We got to make sure those cattle have fresh water. With a storm surge, yeah, there's water there. Yeah, you had canals, but those canals, there's a good chance or have salt water pushed into them. So then you're running into some salt toxicity issues with your cattle. So you got to be very careful about saying where you have water at during a storm surge type situation. Evacuation, sometimes it's really good to take them out of there. Kind of went through a little bit of this already, but be careful to shut off your animals from structures. Yeah, you think you kind of want them some cover, but this is wind. There, a lot of stuff can get blown around, so we want to make sure to keep those away. Now we got our cattle out. Now we got to wait. All right, this is where you need to do your actual planning. Okay, you got a lot of sit down time. You're nervous, anxiety's high. You need to be able to sit and think. All right, my cattle are at my friend's house 50 miles north. I need to know, can he hold them for that long enough for me to make a decision, whether it's a month, 2 months, whatever the case may be, can he do that? And then where's my closest hay supply to where I can get to them to kind of alleviate some of that stress on them? Okay, because you got to think about it. You know, we have friends that want to help, and also, but you're also putting a little extra stress on them. So we got to make sure we have all our bases covered as well. And it's kind of weird to say this, but always expect the worst. You think we've seen the worst? Well, thankfully we really haven't. The worst is yet to come. But when you think you expect the worst, you try to prepare for the best. Here's some things what you can expect from storm surge damage aspect. The picture on the right is actually the same picture that's on the left. This is actually the one on the right is actually a pasture, and all that cane had just rolled over from the storm surge and just matted in areas. This is actually on the road going towards Creole. So if y'all anybody's familiar with going to Creole or south below the intercoastal, you know this is totally changing a landscape. So be sure to know what to expect. A lot of this is during cleanup. I mean, we're trying to push trees and get those of y'all that can't see it. I mean, this will be up this is recorded, will be up later on YouTube, but so you can go back and look at some of these pictures. But yeah, the thing about too, and I want to touch a little bit on this, insect issues. All right. Mosquitoes are horrible after a storm. I mean, we had cattle deaths because due to excessive mosquitoes. They were causing nasal passages. They were getting in their airways, literally suffocating cattle. So that's something we don't really think about in terms of what are some aftermath effects from some of these storms. So you got to think about relief efforts too. What can be done if you're up north and you want to help some guys out? This is some things we can think of too that can help some of our buddies and try to get them back on their feet. And also from a producer standpoint, you got to think about what exactly am I going to need. Try to make those necessary phone calls. Try to think long term. What can be needed probably will. Okay, if you think that one roll of wire that was in the barn, I probably ain't gonna need that, so I'm just gonna demolish my whole barn and not worry about it. Well, actually, there's probably a good chance you will need it. Okay, if you're using wells, water well system, you need a generator to run those wells. Okay, so if you got to have a generator, then you got to have fuel for those generators. Cattle congregated in smaller pastures, they will need hay and feed. They will need some supplementation to keep them going. Fence supplies, again, to get back home, I touched on that a little bit, on the fact that we had total fence lost after during Hurricane Laura. So you got to think about those big pastures where a lot of these cattle were at. That's not there. That's not there for them to use anymore. So you got to think about, if I got to start hunting down supplies, which we were also in the middle of COVID, so supply chain was very much disrupted at that point in time. So finding those supplies was also very critical, and it was in critical need. And again, water source if needed, whether it's running pumps or if you're using surface water of any kind, just be careful if there's a huge storm surge, don't get on salt water. Now we got to evaluate. Okay, it's after we made it back, we're looking at everything. But you also got to think, I mentioned on the mosquitoes, you got to think of what could come after. All right, when everything settles, the dust settles, you're going to have an influx of something, whether it's big, horrible insect problem, debris in pastures that you're not going to see until you happen to walk and step on a board with a nail sticking out of it. Then you got to go to the hospital. So there you got to start thinking. Be careful. Something's going to be there. You might get some back showers. So if you're trying to get structures covered, hay covered, be careful on that. You're going to get some that pop up later. That's going to might put a damper on a lot of plans that you're trying to do. And remember, no two storms are the same now. But if you have a number to your mosquito control board, always keep them on standby. They are very useful in these situations. We utilize them quite a bit after the storms and try making those necessary calls. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about relief, just to know that use your local cattlemen's associations, your state association, Farm Bureau, USDA and RCS. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about USDA at the end of this, but those associations are critical in times of need. All right. Whenever, just for instance, when after Laura, mosquito control boards were on standby, and they were able to contact with FEMA and get the big jets with the spray rigs on them to be able to fly big areas at a time to be able to alleviate some of these issues. And that's just one instance. All right. Now we got through the storm season. Now it's going to start getting cold soon. This is something that we really don't think about, but during a winter storm, we don't realize how much stress our cattle go through, whether it's a night, 2-night freeze, 3 nights, however long the freeze may be. The last freeze we had, it lasted about 3 days. Okay, you go a little further north, it lasted up towards a week. Ice was still hanging a week after this event happened. So you got to think about what kind of stress that puts on our cattle. And we hope our cattle are in winter mode by this point in time. Okay, if you're in our area in Southwest Louisiana, we really don't have a fall. This year, we're actually getting a little fall with some 50-degree nights, which is very nice. It'll really knock down our mosquito population and make it a little bit better for us to go sit outside in the afternoons when it's cooler. But what about our cattle? We got to think about our cattle. Know what type of coat your cattle are going to have in the winter. All right. We have a lot of Bremer influence cattle here. That fall coat and that heavy winter coat might be around the same thing when we think about what does a heavy winter coat and a fall coat look like. Okay. Our Angus cattle, they're going to have their fall coat might look like a summer coat. So we got to think about, I want y'all to know what type of winter coat your cattle do have, just so you can help better prepare for. And some do put on hair quicker than others when we think about our breeds and what we're trying to produce. And our crossbred cattle, they do have the ability to put on hair, just because it is somewhere in their DNA that they can grow those winter coats, those heavy winter coats. Now the critical temperatures is something that they can only stay in this critical temperature for a period of time. For those that can't see this, for a summer coat, wet coat, you're looking at critical temperature of 59 degrees Fahrenheit. That is what that cow can handle for a minimum, I think it's 12 hours, all right, before something has to be done. Fall coat is 45 degrees. Your winter coat is 32 degrees. And a heavy winter coat is 18 degrees Fahrenheit. So we're getting pretty chilly at that 18 degrees. So when you start dealing with those extreme temperatures, one thing you got to think about is our cattle are going to need something, okay? Whether it's just a little bit, some extra energy, extra protein to help them to even maintain them. Now we're not about gaining, we're just talking about maintaining them for the time being. Okay, so if they're burning more calories, we got to find a way to supplement those calories and keep them warm as much as possible. All right, we're going to run into sudden death caused by hypothermia. If it's wet, this is definitely going to increase. All right. When you deal with a dry cold and there's no overcast, cattle seem to do better. All right. That sun does make a difference. Just going back, we look at previous storms, just going back to the last one in 2021, sun wasn't out at all in our area. We had a hard overcast. The wind was blowing. It was just downright miserable. So if we're miserable, think about how those cattle are, and not have that strong ability to warm up. Be careful about feeding grains. You can run into some digestive issues for a strong influx of grains. Those cattle are not used to eating that much at one time, maybe over a period of time, but that rumen has to adjust. Those rumen microbes have to adjust to a high grain diet. Here are some precautions we can take. Try not, if ice troughs or water troughs are freezing over, make sure you break those up and take the ice out there. If cattle still feel that hard surface, they won't drink water. You don't think about it, but cattle will dehydrate during a freeze. We got to make sure that try to keep water with them at all times. Keep hay in front of them so when they are filling up to it, they can eat and gain and try to have some calorie intake. One thing we can do that producers need to look at a little bit more is put these large numbers of cattle in smaller lots. When you talk about the wind blowing, you got to find a way to stop that wind for them. And cattle in a smaller area, you have the body heat effect. So that'll help these cattle stay warm a little bit better to last, hopefully a little bit longer. Hopefully we don't have to hold those cattle in that area for a long time, and this subsides, and we can kind of get them out and get back to normal. But if you do put them in smaller lots, be careful with those smaller calves. In February, there's a lot of spring calves being born, so you'll run into some loss issues from your smaller calves due to this, whether they're they have them in the hay pile, and then cow forgets about it. She's cold. She don't want to move. She don't want to nurse. So, well, you lose a calf because of that. When the ice does thaw, you're going to have some mud hole issues in these smaller lots. So as soon as it thaws or the forecast is looking to be a little bit better, then you can move them out of there to where you don't tear up pasture as much. Wind breaks are important just because the wind chill factor is dropping that temperature at least 10 degrees than what it says it is. So those wind breaks can be crucial. If you can see this picture right here, this is just a makeshift a producer did, is taking a couple of trailers and throwing some tarps up just to be able to break that wind for those cattle. And you can see about 30 of them right there just kind of congregated and getting out the wind. Those girls were miserable during this time. So we got to try to find anything we can do to help them along to try to get past this event. All right. Evaluation is one of those things that takes place longer than what people think, just because of the fact that with a hurricane, by the time storm surge goes down, your normal pasture grasses are gone. They're going to come back. It's going to be some time before those pastures come back. But then what comes in between when your pasture grasses are coming? You're going to have a big time weed issue. Sometimes weeds you've never seen before. And you've been on this pasture for 30 years and you've never seen this weed. Well, guess what? It's gonna show up. Research is being done on a lot of these weeds we've had in the past that's popped up after these storms. There's been weeds that shown up north just because we have them and we deal with them on a regular basis, but producers up north do not. Well, that's because it started here and the hurricane brought it and moved it to another pasture. So that's some of the things that we need to think about. Even with a winter storm, if your grasses do not have that good canopy cover, you're going to get more damage at the soil level than you will with shorter grasses, just because of the fact that freeze is going to could kill some of that root base for you. So your grasses are going to have a hard time coming back in the spring. Whether the hay fields, there was some issue with hay fields after the ice storm, also just because that they might have been cut a little bit late and they didn't get that good growth before going dormant. Well, there was some dead spots come springtime. So that was some things we need to kind of think about that we don't really see until after the fact. Now the government does help, ladies and gentlemen. So if you, after any event, whether it's weather, and then when you think of weather, it could be any kind of weather event. If there was a big lightning storm that happened, okay, the livestock indemnity program can help you. If you suffer anything above a 2% mortality loss, normal mortality loss, you can get compensated, okay? But you need to contact your local FSA office. If you notice on one of the slides, I put take pictures. After any event, take pictures. That documentation will help you in the long run. After an event, after a strong weather event, like for instance, a hurricane, there's a program called the Emergency Conservation Program. A lot of people know it as a fence rebuilder. There's two parts of that program. You have the fence mending and you have the total fence rebuild, where they pay up to a certain foot for fence rebuilds. So that's something a lot of our producers are utilizing and are almost finished with. And we're really thankful for this to help offset some of that cost. When I said that supplies were in critical shortage, now the cost of supplies is through the roof. So imagine having to build 10 miles of fence and it's costing you around 12 grand a mile to be able to get that fence back up. So that's some things to keep in mind when after an event, that there are programs available. Now, talking about the drought, we dealt with a significant drought this year, and this is where the livestock forage program comes into place, where it pays you, where you can get paid on number, and I don't have the formula with me right now, but that's for the guys in the government office to figure that out for you. But there are different programs out there to help you in the midst of an event. And for a drought, we know there's one thing we need during a drought. Everybody knows it, and that's just moisture. And you can supplement with hay, but you also got to think about our pastures. What can we do for our pastures during a drought? Whether it's rotate and try to take enough stress off of them as much as possible. So with that, if there's any questions?
Right, thank you, Brad. So while we're waiting to see if we've got any questions that need to get answered, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick.
Yep. I'll stop.
Right. So if you are viewing the live streaming or the recording of this, we ask that you do please take just a few minutes of your time to complete a brief 5-question survey. There are a couple of ways you can do this. You can use the camera on your phone to view the QR code that you can see on your screen now. So if you click on, whenever you scan or hover over that QR code, there's going to be a banner that appears and it'll take you straight to the survey. You can also access the link in the Q&A box if you're viewing this live, or you can access the link in the video and podcast description if you're viewing the recording of this. So I'm guessing, Ashley, that she's on the ball. I think she's already put it in there. Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Appreciate you doing that for us. I'm looking to see, got anything?
Jason.
Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and give a shout out for our next Beef Brunch webinar while we're giving them a second or two for questions. So on November 8th, again at 10:30, we'll have our November webinar, and that's going to be with Bobby Bingham, and he's going to discuss, he's going to add to what some of what Brad's already said, and just in terms of planning, for winter nutrition. So he's going to talk about feed supplementation, grazing plans, and those sorts of things during the winter months. So again, that'll be live November 8th. That's a Tuesday at 10:30.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. All right, so I don't see any more questions or any questions at this time. We will be posting this recording online within the next week. It can be found on the LSU AgCenter-Livestock YouTube channel. So if you go to YouTube and LSU AgCenter-Livestock, it will also be on our Beef Brunch webpage, which is lsuagcenter.com/Beef Brunch. Again, that Beef Brunch webpage, lsuagcenter.com/Beef Brunch under past webinars. More information and other links you can also find on that Beef Brunch website. We've got a lot of content that we've built over the last year or so, so please check that out for some additional content. Still don't see any questions. Dr. Edwards, you got anything else you want to add?
No, sir. Just thank you to Bradley for doing this for us today, and thank you, Jason, for hosting for me.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you, Brad. That was some really good information. I think anytime that we can go through this exercise and just be reminded of what we do need to do in terms of some of these natural disasters. We live in the state of Louisiana, so we're used to it. We've gotten pretty good at it. The extension agents down there in Brad's part of the world do a lot of work in terms of logistics and helping these guys prepare and recover. So Brad, certainly appreciate the time that you took to do this for us today.
Think y'all enjoyed it. If there's anything, y'all have any questions, anybody out there, just send them my way.
All right, so wrapping up, if you have any other questions regarding the Beef Brunch educational series, please feel free to reach out to Dr. Edwards. That's Dr. Ashley Edwards, and you can reach her by email at akedwards@agcenter.lsu.edu. We appreciate it, and we hope you have a great day.